Your boots squelch in the icy sludge of the Volga, the river's breath a bitter tang of fish and frost that claws at your lungs. Welcome, World War II enthusiasts, to a journey through history's darkest crucible, where courage and despair wrestle in the ruins. If tales of grit and survival stir your soul, please like and subscribe. It means the world to this little corner of storytelling. Drop a comment with your city and the hour you're watching. It's humbling to know how far these whispers travel. So dim the lights, let the fan hum softly, and sink into your pillow. You're not just listening. You're crossing the Volga in 1942. Packed tight on a creaking barge, the drone of Stuka dive bombers echoing in the distance. As a Soviet soldier, you clutch a battered rifle, your heart pounding with the weight of Order 227. Not one step back. The motherland calls, and Stalingrad waits. The barge shudders beneath you, a frail beast groaning under the weight of men and fear as it slices through the Volga's inky current. It's September 1942, and the river's surface mirrors the bruised sky, fractured by bursts of distant artillery that ripple like stones tossed into a dream. Your hands, already numb from the dry, biting cold of the steppe, grip a Mosin Nagant rifle, its wood chipped and its barrel cold as the water lapping at your boots. The air smells of diesel, damp wool, and the acrid tang of gunpowder drifting from the shore. Somewhere ahead, Stalingrad burns, a city turned into a jagged scar of smoke and ruin. You're not just crossing a river, you're crossing into a crucible where the motherland's pulse beats or breaks. Order 227, Stalin's decree, hangs over you like a guillotine. Not one step back. Retreat means death, by German bullets or Soviet ones. Around you, the barge is a mosaic of faces, some too young, others too worn. A polytruk, his coat too clean for the front, paces the deck, his voice cutting through the drone of engines. For the motherland, he barks, eyes blazing with a fire you don't feel. The fascist dogs will choke on Stalingrad's dust. The words are meant to ignite, but they fall like ash on your ears. You glance at Sasha, a wiry boy from Siberia, barely 19, his knuckles white around his rifle. His eyes gleam with the kind of zeal that propaganda posters love. Courage born of naivety. You, a veteran of smaller fights, know better. Courage is just the name you give to moving forward when stopping feels worse. You calculate the seconds it'll take to sprint from the riverbank to the nearest rubble pile, wondering if the polytruk's fervor will outlast the first sniper's shot. The barge lurches as a shell explodes nearby, spraying icy water that stings your face like needles. Men curse, some pray, their voices swallowed by the shriek of Stuka dive bombers circling like vultures above. The polytruk doesn't flinch, shouting about the sacred soil of Stalingrad, but you notice his hands tremble as he lights a cigarette. You shift your weight, boots slipping on the slick deck, and catch the eye of Ivan, a Leningrad mechanic turned soldier. His face is a map of scars and silence, his fingers already tinkering with a jammed PPSH-41 submachine gun. He doesn't speak, but his nod says enough. Survive the crossing, then worry about the rest. The barge grinds against the shore, and the ramp drops with a clang. You're here. Stalingrad's western bank isn't earth. It's a churn of mud, shattered bricks, and twisted metal, as if the city itself has bled out. You step off, boots sinking into the mire, and the cold seeps through the soles, a quiet theft of warmth. The polytruk herds you forward, his voice now hoarse, urging you toward a jagged line of ruined buildings. Artillery thumps in the distance, each boom a reminder that time is measured in heartbeats here. You clutch your rifle tighter, its 5 rounds feeling like a cruel joke. Pick up more from the fallen. A grizzled sergeant growls, his breath steaming in the frigid air. You've heard the stories. 1 rifle for 2 men. A myth that feels too real now. Sasha, beside you, mutters about avenging his village, burned by the Germans. You don't respond. Words are heavy, and you're saving your strength for the sprint to cover. The city looms, a skeleton of stone and steel, its skyline jagged where factories and homes once stood. The Luftwaffe's bombs have turned streets into craters, and the air is thick with the dust of pulverized lives. You duck behind a crumbled wall, heart hammering, as a machine gun chatters somewhere close. The sound is sharp, like a knife slicing through the night. You smell charred wood, and something sweeter, sickening. Blood, maybe, or the memory of it. Ivan crouches nearby, his hands steady as he coaxes life back into his gun. This city's a trap, he murmurs, not looking up. For them or us, you ask, half expecting no answer. He shrugs, a gesture that carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken losses. Leningrad taught him silence. Stalingrad will teach you something worse. You move forward, weaving through rubble that shifts underfoot like a living thing. The polytruk's voice fades behind you, replaced by the sergeant's barked orders. Stay low, keep moving. You glimpse Sasha, his face alight with purpose, tossing a grenade through a shattered window. It explodes with a dull roar, and he grins like a boy who's won a game. You want to warn him that games here end in graves, but there's no time. A bullet pings off the brick beside you, and you drop, breath catching in your throat. The cold is relentless, not the damp chill of forests, but a dry, bone-deep freeze that makes your fingers ache around the rifle's grip. You wonder, fleetingly, if the steppe's vast emptiness is mocking you, its horizon stretching forever, while you fight for a single meter of rubble. Historians still debate whether Order 227 saved Stalingrad, or merely stretched its agony, a question that feels academic as you huddle behind a wall, counting your breaths. From here, with dust stinging your eyes and the polytruk's slogans echoing in your skull, it feels like both. You're not fighting for glory. You're fighting because stopping means dying. Yet, there's a stubborn spark in you, kindled by the thought of home. Perhaps a wooden house in a village, or a cramped apartment with a radio playing softly. The motherland isn't just a poster. It's the smell of your mother's bread, the laughter of a sister you haven't seen in years. You hold that thought as you run, dodging shadows that might be snipers or ghosts. The sergeant signals to halt, pointing to a half-collapsed factory ahead. Its smokestacks lean like drunken sentinels, and the air smells of oil and ash. You crawl into a ditch, the ground hard as iron, and check your rifle again. 5 rounds. You imagine the German across the street, his gun aimed, his fears clawing at him. Does he think of his home too? The thought is a betrayal, and you push it away, focusing on the weight of the rifle, the bite of the cold. Sasha whispers about the fascist dogs, his voice fierce but trembling. Ivan, silent, hands you a cigarette, its paper worn and damp. You don't smoke, but you take it, tucking it into your coat like a talisman. Maybe it'll buy you a moment of luck. As you wait, the city seems to breathe around you, its ruins groaning under the weight of war. A child's shoe lies half buried in the dirt, its laces frayed. You don't look too long, some relics cut deeper than bullets. The sergeant mutters about holding the line, about making the Germans pay for every brick. His words are less a plan than a prayer, and you nod, not because you believe, but because it's what keeps you moving. In this moment, Stalingrad is not a city but a vow, etched in frost and blood. You grip your rifle, the cold metal a mirror to your resolve, and prepare to run again. The Volga is behind you, but its oath follows. Unyielding, unforgiving, eternal. The city greets you with a snarl, its streets a labyrinth of shattered stone and twisted iron, as if Stalingrad itself resents your arrival. You crouch in the shadow of a gutted apartment block, the air thick with the chalky grit of pulverized plaster that coats your tongue like a bitter sacrament. It's September 1942, and the Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats, has already begun, though no one calls it that yet. You're a Soviet soldier, your Mosin Nagant rifle a heavy anchor in your hands, its 5 bullets a fragile promise against the chaos. The sky is a bruise of smoke and dusk, pierced by the occasional scream of artillery shells arcing overhead. Somewhere nearby, a wall collapses, its groans swallowed by the chatter of machine guns. You're not fighting for a city anymore. You're fighting for the next breath, the next corner, the next heartbeat. You move, low and cautious, through an alley choked with debris, splintered beams, a child's tin bucket half melted by fire, shards of glass glinting like cruel stars. The cold of the steppe bites at your knuckles, a dry, relentless chill that makes your fingers fumble as you check your rifle's bolt. It sticks, just a little, as if it too is weary of this place. Your squad, a ragged knot of men, follows the sergeant's hissed commands, weaving through what was once a boulevard, but is now a graveyard of bricks. Sasha, the young Siberian, darts ahead, his movements too eager, too exposed. You want to call him back, but the words catch in your throat, stifled by the dust and the weight of survival. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, trails behind, his PP-SH-41 slung low, his eyes scanning the ruins as if they might yield a secret worth more than bullets. A burst of gunfire erupts from a window above, and you dive behind a crumbled fountain, its basin cracked and dry. The bullets snap past, kicking up puffs of dirt that sting your eyes. You press your cheek to the ground, the earth cold and unyielding, smelling of ash and something faintly metallic. Blood, perhaps, soaked into the soil. Sasha rolls into cover beside you, panting, his face smudged with soot, but still alight with that reckless fire. Fascist, he spits, as if the word alone could kill. You nod, not because you agree, but because it's easier than explaining the hollowness you feel. Ivan crawls up, his fingers already working to clear a jam in his gun. They're closer than yesterday, he mutters, his voice flat, as if noting the weather. You wonder what Leningrad took from him to make him so steady, so silent. The sergeant signals to advance, pointing to a half-collapsed factory across the street, its skeletal frame looming like a beast too stubborn to die. You run, legs burning, heart pounding against your ribs like a trapped bird. The air is a haze of dust, so thick it feels like breathing sand, and every shadow seems to pulse with the threat of a German helmet. You reach the factory's doorway, its hinges twisted, and slip inside, where the air smells of oil and scorched metal. The floor is littered with machine parts, papers, and a broken chair, remnants of a life before the bombs. You pause, catching your breath, and notice a faded poster on the wall, its Cyrillic letters proclaiming for the motherland. The irony twists in your gut like a blade. The motherland is here, in this wreckage, and it demands everything. Sasha, undeterred, checks his grenades, counting them like a child counts marbles. We'll push them back, he says, more to himself than to you. You don't answer. Instead, you trace the cracks in the wall with your eyes, wondering how many hands built this place before others tore it down. Ivan kneels, inspecting a pile of scrap, and pulls out a bent wrench. "Might fix something," he says, tucking it into his coat. His pragmatism is a lifeline, a reminder that survival is built from small, stubborn acts. You think of home, a village stove, a mother's voice, a life where wrenches fix plows, not wars. The thought is a luxury you can't afford, so you shove it deep, like a letter you'll never send. A sudden silence falls, heavier than the gunfire. It's the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl, as if the city is holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. You peer through a shattered window, seeing nothing but shadows and rubble. The Germans are out there, maybe in the next building, maybe behind the next wall. You've heard stories of their snipers, patient as spiders, and their panzers, grinding through streets like iron gods. Yet, you've also heard their shouts in the night, their voices cracking with hunger or fear. They're not invincible, but neither are you. The sergeant whispers to hold position, his face carved with lines that seem older than the city itself. You nod, gripping your rifle, its weight a reminder of the 5 bullets you can't waste. Historians still debate whether the Soviet High Command believed Stalingrad could be held, or if they simply fed men into the fire to stall the German advance. From this crumbling factory, with dust settling in your hair like snow, both truths feel equally cruel. You're not here for strategy. You're here because the alternative is a firing squad or a German bayonet. Yet, there's a flicker of defiance in you, not for banners or speeches, but for the memory of a life worth returning to. You think of a table set for dinner, of laughter that didn't carry the echo of bombs. Sasha interrupts, offering a strip of dried bread, hard as stone. "Eat," he says, grinning. "Fascists don't get dessert." You take it, chewing slowly, the taste bitter but grounding. The night deepens, and the cold tightens its grip, turning your breath into fleeting clouds. You huddle in a corner, the factory's walls offering scant shelter. A distant explosion shakes the floor, and you flinch, but it's too far to matter. Ivan lights a cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his face, etched with exhaustion. "This city," he says, exhaling smoke, "it's eating us all." You don't disagree. Stalingrad is a beast, devouring friend and foe alike, its appetite endless. You find a scrap of paper in your pocket, a ration ticket, useless now, and fold it into a tiny square, a ritual to keep your hands from trembling. The sergeant paces, muttering about the next push, but his words are drowned by the city's language, creaks of settling rubble, the whine of wind through broken windows. You close your eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just resting, and the sounds of war fade to a dull hum. You imagine a world where cities don't burn, where bread isn't a treasure, where survival isn't a gamble against fate. The thought is fleeting, fragile, but it anchors you. Sasha hums a tune, soft and off-key, something from the steppes. It's not comfort, but it's close enough. You open your eyes, check your rifle again, and settle into the weight. The city watches, its ruins whispering of battles yet to come. You're a soldier, a survivor, a speck in Stalingrad's vast, unyielding maw. And somehow, that's enough to keep you moving forward. The city of Stalingrad is a beast that shifts its bones beneath your feet, its streets dissolving into a chaos of crumbled stone and jagged metal, as if the earth itself is rewriting its map. The air is heavy with the sour dust of shattered concrete, a gritty veil that clings to your skin and burns your throat. Above, the sky is a sullen grey, streaked with smoke trails from fires that never seem to die. Your Mosin Nagant rifle, its bolt still stubborn, feels heavier now, as if it knows the odds stacked against its 5 remaining bullets. Every step is a gamble, every shadow a potential grave, and yet you move, driven by a resolve that feels less like courage and more like defiance against a world gone mad. You slip through a narrow gap between 2 collapsed buildings, the walls leaning inward like conspirators whispering secrets. The cold of the step seeps into your bones, a dry, piercing chill that makes your fingers ache as they trace the rifle's worn grip. Somewhere nearby, a single shot cracks the air, sharp and solitary, followed by a silence that feels like a held breath. You freeze, heart thudding, scanning the ruins for movement. The Germans are close, perhaps in the next alley, perhaps behind the splintered door frame you just passed. You've learned to fear the quiet more than the gunfire. Noise means you know where death is coming from. Sasha, the young Siberian, crouches beside you, his breath quick and shallow, his eyes darting like a hunted animal's. He clutches a grenade, his knuckles pale, as if it's the only thing tethering him to purpose. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, lingers a few paces back, his PPH-41 slung across his chest, his gaze fixed on a pile of rubble, as if it might yield a spare part or a miracle. "This place changes faster than we do," he mutters, kicking a shard of glass that skitters across the ground like a fleeing insect. You nod, not because you agree, but because the truth is too heavy to voice. The city is a kaleidoscope of destruction, its landmarks, shops, theatres, homes, reduced to indistinguishable heaps by noon. You remember a bakery from yesterday, its sign half readable, now just a smear of ash and brick. The thought twists in your gut, not for the bread you'll never taste, but for the hands that needed it, now gone or scattered like the dust in your lungs. You press forward, weaving through a street that's more crater than pavement, the ground uneven underfoot. A child's drawing, smudged with soot, lies pinned beneath a broken beam, a stick figure family under a sun that no longer shines here. You look away, not out of fear, but because some relics cut deeper than shrapnel. The sergeant, his voice a low rasp, signals to take cover behind a shattered fountain, its stone lion headless but still defiant. You drop to one knee, the cold seeping through your trousers, and check your rifle again, a ritual as futile as it is necessary. Sasha whispers about the fascists, his voice a mix of venom and nerves, as if naming them might summon them closer. Ivan, silent, pulls a bent nail from the rubble and tucks it into his pocket, as if it might fix the war itself. A sudden clatter breaks the quiet, a brick falling, or a footstep, you can't tell. You raise your rifle, heart hammering, but it's just a rat, scurrying across the debris with a boldness you envy. You lower the barrel, exhaling a cloud of breath that hangs in the air like a ghost. The city is alive with these small betrayals, sounds that mimic danger, shadows that mimic men. You've heard the Germans in the night, their voices carrying through the ruins, not triumphant but weary, calling for water or home. It's a strange thought, that they might be as tired as you, as cold, as human. You push it down, burying it beneath the weight of duty, but it lingers, a crack in the armor of your hatred. The sergeant motions to move, pointing to a gutted warehouse across a plaza littered with broken pipes and scorched furniture. You run, legs heavy, the air stinging your eyes with its mix of ash and frost. A machine gun stutters from a distant rooftop, and you dive behind a toppled cart, its wheels frozen in place. The bullets miss, but the sound is a knife in your chest, sharp and personal. You glance at Sasha, who's pressed against the cart, his grenade still clutched like a prayer. "They're everywhere," he hisses, his voice trembling but fierce. You don't answer. You're too busy counting the seconds until the next burst. Ivan slides in beside you, his face unreadable, and begins prying at a jammed magazine. If we die, at least it's not quiet, he says, a wry twist in his voice that makes you smirk despite yourself. Historians still debate whether the Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats, was the key to holding Stalingrad, or merely a descent into deeper suffering. From this splintered plaza, with the dust coating your lips and the silence heavier than any bomb, it feels like both. You're not fighting for maps or medals, you're fighting for the next moment, the next breath. Yet, there's a stubborn pulse in you, a memory of a life where mornings meant coffee, not gunfire, where streets held markets, not mines. You cling to it, not as hope, but as defiance, a refusal to let the city swallow you whole. Sasha offers a piece of potato raw and gritty, dug from some ruined kitchen. Fascist stew, he says, his grin half-hearted but sharp. You take it, chewing slowly, the taste grounding you in this endless maze. Night falls, and the cold deepens, a dry, clawing chill that makes your joints ache. You huddle in the warehouse, its roof half gone, stars visible through the gaps like distant judges. The air smells of rust and charred wood, a reminder of the factory's former life. You find a corner, wrapping your scarf tighter, and notice a photograph wedged in the rubble. A woman, her smile frozen in time, her eyes unaware of the war that erased her world. You leave it there, untouched, a silent pact with the ghosts of Stalingrad. Ivan sits nearby, cleaning his gun with a rag that's more dirt than cloth. This city, he says, his voice barely a whisper. It's a machine that grinds us all. You nod, not because you understand, but because you feel it. The city's hunger, its relentless demand for blood and bone. The sergeant returns, his face gaunt, his orders clipped. Hold this position until dawn. You settle in, rifle across your lap, the cold metal a mirror to your resolve. A distant explosion lights the horizon, brief and brutal, but too far to touch you. You think of home, not the propaganda posters, but the real one. A wooden table, a radio's soft hum, a mother's voice calling you to dinner. The memory is a flicker, fragile but fierce, and you hold it close as the city whispers its threats. Sasha hums again, a Siberian lullaby, its notes jagged but soothing. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest, letting the ruins cradle you in their unyielding embrace. Stalingrad watches, its maze endless, but you're still here, still breathing, still defiant. Stalingrad's ruins twist around you like a fever dream, their jagged edges blurring into a maze where every turn feels like a trap set by the city itself. The air carries the stale reek of charred plaster and something sharper, decay perhaps, or the ghost of it, lingering in the crevices of broken walls. Your Mosin Nagant rifle, its 5 bullets now a grim currency, hangs heavy on your shoulder, its weight a reminder of the choices you can't afford to make. The sky above is a dull slate, scarred by the trails of distant shells, and the silence between their blasts is a predator, stalking you with the promise of unseen enemies. You're not just surviving, you're threading a needle through the heart of chaos, each step a defiance of fate's cruel arithmetic. You slip into a narrow passage, once a hallway, now a gauntlet of splintered beams and exposed wires that dangle like the entrails of a gutted beast. The cold gnaws at your fingertips, turning them clumsy as you grip the rifle, its bolt catching with a faint protest. A faint scuffle echoes ahead, and you freeze, heart hammering against your ribs like a prisoner begging for release. It's not gunfire, not yet, just the city's restless muttering, a brick shifting or a rat darting through the shadows. You've learned to dread these quiet moments when the absence of sound feels like a prelude to death. Sasha, the young Siberian, moves beside you, his eyes wide but fierce, clutching a grenade as if it's a talisman against the dark. His breath is quick, too quick, betraying the courage he wears like a borrowed coat. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, trails behind, his PP-41 cradled like a child, his gaze sweeping the ruins with a quiet intensity. "This place doesn't let you rest," he says, his voice a low rasp, as if the dust has settled in his throat. You nod, not because you have an answer, but because his words are a mirror to the exhaustion carving itself into your bones. The city is a living thing, its streets shifting, its walls collapsing into new configurations by the hour. You pass a doorway, its frame warped, and glimpse a faded curtain fluttering like a surrender flag. Inside, a table lies overturned, a single spoon glinting in the dim light, a relic of a meal interrupted, a life erased. You don't linger. Some ghosts are too heavy to carry. The sergeant signals to take cover behind a toppled statue, its stone face half buried in ash, eyes staring blankly at the sky. You drop low, the ground hard and unforgiving, smelling of soot and rust. A distant scream cuts through the quiet. Not a battle cry, but something rawer, more human. A German soldier, perhaps, calling for a mother who can't hear him. The sound stirs something in you, not pity, but a fleeting crack in the wall of hatred you've built. You push it away, focusing on the weight of your rifle, the chill seeping through your coat. Sasha mutters about fascist dogs, his voice sharp but unsteady, as if he's trying to convince himself. Ivan, silent, pulls a broken gear from the rubble and examines it, as if it might fix the war's machinery. "Maybe we'll rebuild this city with their bones," he says, his tone dry as the steppe wind, and you smirk, not because it's funny, but because it's easier than thinking. A burst of gunfire erupts from a nearby alley, and you dive behind a pile of bricks, their edges cutting into your palms. The bullets whistle past, close enough to stir the air, and you press your face to the ground, tasting the bitter grit of Stalingrad's ruin. Your heart races, a frantic rhythm against the city's pulse of destruction. Sasha rolls beside you, his grenade still clutched, his eyes burning with a mix of fear and fury. "They're everywhere," he whispers, his voice a taut wire. You don't answer. You're too busy listening for the next shot, the next betrayal of sound. Ivan, crouched nearby, begins dismantling a jammed clip, his fingers steady despite the chaos. "If we're rats, they're rats too," he says, a faint twist in his voice, as if the war is just a game of who scurries better. Historians still debate whether the Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats, was a masterstroke of Soviet resistance or a descent into mutual annihilation. From this crumbling alley, with the dust painting your face like a shroud, it feels like both. A brutal dance where neither side knows the steps. You're not fighting for strategy. You're fighting for the next moment, the next breath. Yet, there's a stubborn thread in you, woven from memories of a life before this. A market square, a sister's laughter, a morning without the stench of war. You hold it close, not as hope, but as a shield against despair. Sasha offers a scrap of cloth, torn from some forgotten curtain, to wipe the dust from your eyes. "Fascist rags," he says, his grin sharp but brittle. You take it, wiping your face, the fabric rough but grounding. The night settles over the city like a heavy curtain, the cold sharpening into a blade that cuts through your coat. You find shelter in a half-collapsed basement, its walls damp and streaked with mold. The air smells of rot and forgotten lives, a reminder that Stalingrad was once a city of homes, not graves. You huddle in a corner, your scarf pulled tight, and notice a child's mitten, its wool frayed lying in a puddle. You leave it there, a silent vow to the ghosts who linger. Ivan sits nearby, sharpening a knife with a stone, the sound rhythmic, almost soothing. "This city," he says, not looking up. "It's a grinder, and we're the grain." You nod, feeling the truth in your bones, the city's relentless hunger for flesh and will. The sergeant returns, his face etched with exhaustion, his orders brief. "Hold until morning, watch for snipers." You settle in, rifle across your knees, the cold metal a mirror to your resolve. A distant explosion lights the sky, brief and brutal, but too far to touch you. You think of a world where nights meant rest, not vigilance, where basements held wine, not soldiers. The thought is a flicker, fragile but fierce, and you cling to it as the city hums its threats. Sasha whispers about revenge, his voice fading into a yawn. Ivan offers a cigarette, its paper crumpled but precious. You take it, not to smoke but to hold, a small act of defiance against the maze that seeks to swallow you whole. The grain elevator rises before you like a monolithic sentinel, its concrete silos scarred by shell fire, standing defiant amid the wreckage of Stalingrad's industrial heart. The structure looms, vast and unyielding, its walls pocked with craters that resemble the eyes of a weary giant. Inside, the air is thick with suspended grain dust, a golden fog that dances in the dim light filtering through shattered vents, turning each breath into a labored rasp. Your lungs protest, coughing up the fine particles that coat your throat like a shroud of forgotten harvests. The elevator isn't just a building, it's a fortress forged from the city's grit, a symbol of endurance, where every floor holds the echo of machinery long silenced. You climb the rickety stairs, boots echoing on metal grates, the sound swallowed by the vast emptiness. The cold here is different, trapped within the concrete, a stagnant freeze that clings to your skin like regret. Your Mosin Nagant rifle, its barrel still warm from earlier skirmishes, feels like an extension of your arm, its remaining bullets a sparse arsenal against the tide. The sergeant leads, his silhouette sharp against the dusty gloom, assigning positions with gestures honed by necessity. Sasha, the young Siberian, takes a spot near a window, his grenade pouch bulging like a promise of retribution. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, settles by a ventilation shaft, his PP SH-41 ready, his fingers absently tracing the weapon's seams as if seeking flaws in the world's design. You find your perch behind a grain chute, the metal cold against your back, and peer out at the approaching shadows. The Germans come in waves, their advance a rumble that vibrates through the floor, tanks grinding over debris like predators scenting weakness. You hear them first, the guttural commands, the clank of tracks, the whine of engines straining against the rubble. Then the gunfire erupts, a staccato fury that chips at the walls, sending fragments flying like angry wasps. You aim through the haze, squeezing the trigger, the rifle kicking against your shoulder with a familiar jolt. The barrel heats quickly, glowing faintly in the dimness, a red vein pulsing in the dust-choked air. Bullets ricochet, their whines mingling with shouts that carry no language but pain. You reload, fingers fumbling in the gloom, the metallic click a small victory amid the roar. Sasha hurls a grenade through a breach, its arc graceful before it detonates in a bloom of fire and smoke. "Take that, invaders," he growls, his voice muffled by the dust. But there's a tremor beneath his bravado, a crack where youth meets reality. You fire again, the shot lost in the cacophony, and watch a figure crumple in the distance, a shadow folding into the ground. The elevator shakes under artillery impact, its structure groaning like a beast in agony, dust cascading from the ceiling in golden cascades. Your eyes water, the grain particles stinging like accusations, turning the world into a blurred tapestry of motion and menace. Ivan's PPS chatters nearby, its rapid bursts a counterpoint to the heavier thuds of enemy fire, his face set in a mask of quiet determination. The assault intensifies, waves crashing against the elevator's base, soldiers scrambling up makeshift ladders or through breaches blasted by Panzerfausts. You switch to your bayonet when bullets run low, the blade glinting dully in the filtered light, a primitive tool in this industrial tomb. A German bursts through a lower door, and you lunge, the clash of steel ringing out amid the chaos. He falls, but another takes his place, their faces blurred by helmets and grime, eyes wide with the same desperation you feel. The air reeks of cordite and sweat, a metallic tang that coats your tongue, mingling with the ever-present grain dust that now feels like the elevator's own weapon, choking friend and foe alike. You pause in a lull, wiping sweat from your brow, the liquid mixing with dust to form a gritty paste. The cold seeps deeper, a subtle thief stealing warmth from your limbs, making movement sluggish. Sasha leans against a silo, catching his breath, his grenade hand trembling slightly. "They keep coming," he says, his tone laced with a weary edge, as if the endless tide is a joke the war plays on you all. Ivan, reloading, glances up with a faint nod. "Like waves on the Volga, but we're the rock," he replies, his words carrying a dry bite that masks the exhaustion etching his features. You don't laugh, but the thought lingers. A wry acknowledgement that survival here is as much about stubbornness as strategy. The elevator holds secrets in its depths, silos half filled with grain that spills like golden blood from cracks in the concrete. You scoop a handful, letting it sift through your fingers, a fleeting reminder of fields far from this hell, where harvest meant life, not dust in your lungs. The structure vibrates again, a shell impacting nearby, and you brace against the wall, feeling the building's pulse mirror your own. Historians still debate whether the grain elevator was a beacon of Soviet defiance or merely a concrete coffin prolonging the inevitable. From your vantage, amid the swirling haze and the heat of your rifle's barrel, it embodies both. A bastion where endurance is etched in every scar, every breath labored through the golden fog. The Germans press on, their shouts growing frantic, a chorus of desperation that echoes your unspoken fears. You fire into the advancing line, the recoil a jolt that grounds you, pulling you back from the edge of numbness. Sasha tosses another grenade, its explosion a brief thunder that scatters the attackers, buying precious seconds. Ivan's weapon stutters, clearing a path, his precision a testament to hands shaped by peacetime tools now turned to war. The cold intensifies as night creeps in, turning sweat to ice on your skin, a cruel reminder that the elements fight alongside the enemy. You think of a harvest moon over untouched fields, a life where grain-fed families, not fueled by this grim theatre. The thought is a quiet rebellion, a spark in the dust-choked dark. The assault ebbs, not from mercy but exhaustion, leaving the elevator scarred but standing. You slump against the chute, rifle smoking faintly, the air still thick with the scent of expended powder and unsettled grain. Sasha wipes his face, smearing dust into war paint, his eyes holding a mix of triumph and weariness. Ivan checks his ammunition, his movements methodical, as if order can be salvaged from the disarray. The sergeant patrols the perimeter, his voice low, praising the hold, while his eyes betray the cost. You close your eyes briefly, not to sleep, but to gather the fragments of resolve scattered by the barrage. The elevator whispers its endurance, its walls a testament to what remains when everything else crumbles. In this concrete hive, you're not merely a soldier. You're a thread in the fabric of resistance, woven from necessity and loss. The cold wraps around you, a shroud that chills but doesn't conquer, and you rise again, ready for the next wave. The city outside hums with distant threats, but here, in the elevator's embrace, you endure, a quiet defiance against the storm. The grain elevator looms around you, its concrete walls a scarred colossus breathing dust and defiance in the heart of Stalingrad's ruin. The cold of the steppe has seeped into the structure, a dry frost that numbs your fingers as they curl around the bayonet now fixed to your empty rifle. Outside, the city moans under relentless shelling, each blast a thunderous pulse that shakes loose more dust, coating your face like a second skin. The elevator is no longer just a stronghold. It's a crucible where survival is forged from desperation. Each moment a fragile thread stretched taut against the chaos of war. You brace against a steel beam, its surface pitted by shrapnel, as another German assault surges below, their boots crunching over debris like the tread of a relentless machine. The sound of their advance shouts in guttural tones, the clatter of gear mingles with the shriek of incoming shells, creating a cacophony that drowns out thought. You peer through a jagged hole in the wall, the world outside a blur of smoke and shadow, and spot their silhouettes scrambling over rubble, helmets glinting faintly in the dusk. Your heart hammers, a frantic rhythm against the elevator's pulse. As you ready your bayonet, the blade a cold promise in the absence of bullets. Even the Leningrad mechanic crouches nearby, his PPSH-41 spent, now wielding a shovel sharpened to a wicked edge. His eyes are steady, but there's a flicker in them, a silent tally of battles he never speaks of. Sasha is a ghost of his former fire, his face smudged with soot as he clutches a single grenade, his last. He's positioned by a stairwell, his breath ragged, his earlier zeal eroded by the endless grind. You catch his eye, and he nods, a gesture more reflex than resolve. Then it happens. A sniper's bullet, invisible and precise, finds him through a narrow gap. He slumps, a soft exhale escaping as he falls, the grenade rolling free. You lunge, snatching the pouch from his side, its weight heavy with more than just explosives. There's no time to mourn, no space for grief in this concrete tomb. You tuck the grenades into your coat, their cold metal a grim inheritance, and turn back to the fight, the elevator's dust stinging your eyes like tears you can't shed. The Germans press closer, their gunfire a relentless drumbeat that chips away at the walls, sending concrete fragments raining down like bitter confetti. You thrust your bayonet through a breach, meeting flesh and resistance, the act mechanical yet intimate, a dance of survival in the half-light. The air reeks of blood and scorched grain, a suffocating blend that clogs your throat as you fight, each movement a defiance of the exhaustion pulling at your limbs. Ivan swings his shovel, a brutal arc that fells an attacker, his face unyielding, as if the war is just another machine to be dismantled. "Keep them out," he grunts, his voice a low growl, and you nod, driven by a resolve that feels less like courage and more like a refusal to break. The elevator shakes again, a shell striking its base, the impact reverberating through your bones like a tuning fork struck by fate. Dust cascades, a golden veil that blurs friend from foe. turning the battle into a dreamlike frenzy of shapes and sounds. You hurl one of Sasha's grenades, its explosion a muffled roar that scatters the attackers, buying a moment's reprieve. The silence that follows is fleeting, heavy with the promise of more to come. You slump against the beam, breath heaving, the cold seeping deeper, turning your fingers into clumsy strangers. Ivan wipes blood from his shovel, his movements methodical, as if cleaning it might restore some order to this chaos. He was too young, he says, not looking at Sasha's body, his voice carrying a weight that needs no explanation. You find a moment to glance at the grain spilling from a cracked silo, its golden stream catching the faint light like a river frozen in time. It's a strange beauty, a reminder of a world where fields grew food, not graves. You think of harvest back home, of hands that sowed and reaped under open skies, now lost to this endless war. The thought is a quiet rebellion, a flicker of life in a place that devours it. The sergeant, his face carved with new lines, barks orders to reinforce the upper floors, his voice hoarse but unyielding. You move, legs heavy, the elevator's walls closing in like a judge passing sentence. Historians still debate whether the grain elevator was a symbol of Soviet resilience or a concrete purgatory that consumed all who entered. From this dust-choked perch, with Sasha's grenades heavy in your coat, it feels like both. A fortress where survival is a debt paid in blood. The assault resumes, a fresh wave of Germans climbing through breaches, their shouts desperate now, as if they too are trapped in this relentless cycle. You fight with bayonet and fist, the elevator a maze of steel and shadow where every corner hides death. The air is a furnace of dust and heat, the grain particles igniting in small bursts as sparks fly from ricochets. Your body moves on instinct, each thrust and dodge a testament to a will that refuses to yield. Ivan fights beside you, his shovel a brutal instrument, his silence louder than the gunfire. The cold deepens as night falls, turning sweat to ice, a cruel reminder that the elements are as merciless as the enemy. You think of a firelit room, a memory so distant it feels like a lie, but it anchors you, a thread of defiance against the abyss. The battle slows, not from victory, but exhaustion, the Germans falling back under the weight of their losses. You collapse against a silo, the grain dust settling like a shroud, your breath ragged in the stillness. Ivan checks his shovel, its edge dulled but unbroken, his face a map of endurance. The sergeant counts the living, his voice a low murmur, as if afraid to wake the dead. Sasha lies still, a boy who dreamed of heroes now part of the elevator's grim tapestry. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to gather the fragments of yourself scattered by the fight. The elevator stands, scarred but defiant, its walls whispering of battles yet to come. You're a soldier, a survivor, a spark in Stalingrad's unyielding fire, and for now, that's enough to keep you fighting. Winter descends on Stalingrad like a vengeful spirit, its icy breath turning the Volga into a fractured mirror that reflects the city's ruin. The air smells of frost and faint decay, a sour tang that lingers on your cracked lips, mingling with the ache of hunger gnawing at your core. Your boots, wrapped in scavenged cloth, creak against the ice, each step a protest against the numbness creeping up your legs. The river, once a lifeline, is now a treacherous sheet of ice, too thin to trust, too thick to cross by barge. You clutch your Mosin Nagant, its barrel frosted, a relic of battles past, and feel the weight of survival shift from bullets to endurance, as if the war has become a contest of who can outlast the cold. You crouch low, scanning the horizon where the Volga meets the city's jagged skyline, its factories and homes reduced to silhouettes against a sky heavy with snow. The wind howls, a mournful song that carries the distant thud of artillery, each blast a reminder that the Germans are still out there, their breath steaming in the freeze. Your squad, a dwindled knot of survivors, shelters in this trench, its walls lined with frost that glints like cruel diamonds. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, sits nearby, his fingers wrapped around a makeshift stove, a tin can with smouldering twigs, his face etched with a quiet defiance that speaks of winters survived. He doesn't mention Sasha, the boy lost to a sniper's bullet, but his silence carries the weight of absence, a void you all feel but cannot name. The supply lines are a fading memory, the Volga's ice choking off the barges that once brought bread and bullets. You've heard of men crawling across the frozen river at night, dragging sleds loaded with meager rations, their shadows darting under German searchlights. Many don't return, swallowed by cracks in the ice or cut down by machine guns that chatter like angry ghosts. You've joined one such run, belly down on the frozen Volga, the ice groaning beneath you, each creak a whisper of betrayal. The sled, tied to your waist, carries a sack of flour and a few clips of ammunition, its weight a lifeline and a burden. The cold burns your palms through torn gloves, and the air smells of iron and river mud, a bitter reminder of the cost of every loaf. You reach the shore gasping, the sled's contents intact, but your strength frayed. A corporal, his face half hidden by a scarf, hands you a crust of bread, black and hard as coal. You chew it slowly, the taste gritty, like eating the city itself. Fascists would trade their tanks for this, he mutters, his voice a dry rasp, and you nod, not because it's funny, but because it's the only currency left, shared defiance in the face of want. The hunger is a living thing now, a beast that coils in your gut, sharpening your senses while dulling your hope. You think of meals back home, not lavish feasts, but simple ones, potatoes steaming in a bowl, a mother's voice calling you to the table. The memory is a spark, fragile but fierce, and you guard it against the cold's relentless theft. The trench offers little shelter, its walls crumbling under the wind's assault, and you wrap your scarf tighter, the fabric stiff with frost. Ivan tends the stove, its faint warmth a mockery of comfort, and pulls a bent spoon from his pocket, examining it as if it might hold answers. This city starves us all, he says, his words soft but heavy, as if the war has stripped even his voice to its barest bones. You glance at the Volga, its ice glinting under a moonless sky, and wonder how many lie beneath it, their dreams frozen in the current. The thought is a betrayal, a crack in the resolve you've built, but it lingers, a quiet question about the cost of holding this ground. A distant shout breaks the silence, not German but Soviet, a runner stumbling through the snow with news of a supply drop that never came. The sergeant, his eyes hollow, listens and nods, his orders clipped. Hold the trench, watch the river. You settle in, rifle across your knees, the cold metal a mirror to your dwindling strength. The steppe stretches beyond the city, vast and indifferent, its emptiness a stark contrast to the life you fight for. You find a scrap of cloth in your pocket, torn from a banner, and fold it into a tight square, a ritual to keep your hands from trembling. Ivan offers a sip of water from a canteen, its contents tasting of rust and ice, a small act of camaraderie in this frozen purgatory. Historians still debate whether the Volga's freezing saved Stalingrad by cutting German supply lines or doomed more men to its icy depths. From this trench, with frost biting your fingers and hunger clawing your insides, it feels like both. a cruel twist where survival is as much a punishment as a prize. You're not fighting for glory, you're fighting to see another dawn, to hold on to the memory of a world where winters meant warmth, not war. The sergeant paces, his boots crunching snow, his face a map of exhaustion. They'll come again, he says, not specifying who, Germans, supplies, or death itself. You nod, the motion automatic, your resolve a thread stretched thin, but unbroken. Night deepens, the cold sharpening into a blade that cuts through your coat, turning breath to ice on your scarf. You huddle closer to the stove, its embers fading, and notice a child's glove frozen in the trench's wall, its fingers curled as if reaching for something lost. You leave it there, a silent pact with the ghosts that haunt this city. Ivan hums a tune, faint and off-key, a Leningrad lullaby that feels out of place, yet anchoring. Keeps the cold out, he says, his voice barely a whisper, and you smirk, not because it's true, but because it's a lie you both need. The Volga glitters beyond, its ice a treacherous promise, and you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to rest, letting the city's frozen heart beat in time with your own. The Volga's ice spreads like a silver scar across the horizon, its surface cracked and unforgiving under a sky heavy with unspoken promises. The cold is a thief, stealing sensation from your extremities, turning your toes into distant strangers wrapped in rags that offer scant rebellion. The air carries the sharp bite of frost mixed with the faint metallic scent of distant fires, a reminder that Stalingrad still smoulders beyond the river's edge. Your stomach twists, an empty vessel echoing with the ghost of meals long gone, and you crawl forward, pulling a sled laden with sparse supplies, flour dusted with snow, a few precious clips of ammunition, toward the city's battered shore. The ice groans beneath you, a low lament that echoes the uncertainty gnawing at your thoughts, as if the river itself questions your resolve. Whispers have begun to circulate through the trenches, carried on the wind like fragile leaves. General Zhukov is gathering forces, tanks rumbling in the north and south, a grand encirclement brewing under the codename Uranus. You've heard the rumors from runners, their faces gaunt but eyes alight with a spark you dare not trust. Thousands of T-34s, one said, his voice hushed against German ears. Yet, you don't allow yourself to hope. Hope is a luxury, a flame too easily extinguished by the steppes' relentless chill. Instead, you focus on the sled's rope biting into your shoulder, the slow drag across the ice, each inch a victory against the night's perils. German searchlights sweep the river, their beams slicing the darkness like accusatory fingers, and you flatten yourself, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant artillery. A machine gun stutters from the far bank, bullets skipping across the ice like stones on water, and you hold your breath, the cold burning your lungs. The sled catches on a crack, and you tug it free, muscles straining, the effort a quiet testament to the endurance that has kept you alive this far. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, crawls beside you, his form a shadow in the gloom, his PP SH-41 strapped to his back. He doesn't speak of the rumors, but his silence carries a weight, as if he's weighing the possibility against the war's cruel ledger. Zhukov's ghosts, he mutters finally, his voice a dry whisper, and you catch the faint curve of his lips, a wry acknowledgement that plans are as fragile as the ice beneath you. You reach the shore, collapsing into a shallow depression, the snow cushioning your fall like a mocking embrace. The city's ruins loom nearby, their silhouettes jagged against the starless sky, and you unpack the sled with numb hands, distributing the meager haul. A sack of grain, hardened by frost, feels like stones in your palms, and you break off a chunk, chewing it raw, the taste bland and unyielding. Hunger has become a companion, a constant shadow that sharpens your senses while dulling your dreams. You think of feasts in another life, steaming borscht, fresh rye bread, memories that now seem like tales from a forgotten book, distant and unreal. The cold deepens, wrapping around you like a shroud, and you huddle closer to Ivan, sharing the scant warmth of shared exhaustion. A faint cry drifts from the German lines, not a battle shout but a plaintive call. Mutter, repeated like a mantra in the night. It pierces the quiet, human and raw, stirring something in you that you quickly bury. The voice belongs to an enemy, a fascist invader whose boots have trampled your land. Yet in this frozen moment, it echoes your unspoken longings. You clench your fist, the rage surging back, a fire that warms your blood against the chill. They're breaking, Ivan says, his tone flat but laced with a subtle edge, as if the war's absurdity is a joke only the survivors understand. You nod, not because you believe it fully, but because it's a thread to cling to in the darkness. The sergeant gathers the squad, his face hollowed by shadows, and briefs you on the next crawl, his words clipped against the wind. Supplies won't last, he says, stating the obvious, and you feel the group's collective resolve harden, a shared armor against despair. You volunteer for another run, not from bravery but from the need to move, to act against the hunger's insidious pull. The ice awaits, its cracks like veins in a giant's skin, and you set out again, the sled trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. The cold bites deeper, turning your breath to crystals that shatter on the wind, and you crawl inch by inch, the river's surface a treacherous ally. Historians still debate whether the Volga's freeze was a strategic boon, severing German logistics, or a curse that claimed more lives in its depths. From this icy crawl, with hunger coiling in your belly and whispers of encirclement on your lips, it feels like both, a double-edged blade where salvation and doom intertwine. You're not fighting for grand plans, you're fighting for the dawn, for the memory of a full stomach and a warm hearth. The thought is a quiet anchor, pulling you forward through the frost. Ivan pauses, adjusting his strap, and glances back. Fascists dream of our bread now, he says, his voice carrying a faint, bitter amusement, as if the reversal is the war's punchline. The shore recedes, the cities glow faint on the horizon, and you push on. The sleds wait a constant tug. A searchlight sweeps close, and you freeze, face pressed to the ice, its chill a kiss that numbs your cheek. The beam passes, and you exhale, continuing the crawl. The hunger sharpens your focus, turning the world to essentials. The rope in your hand, the ice beneath, the promise of supplies ahead. You think of villages far from here, where winters meant stories by the fire, not this endless vigil. The memory is a spark, dim but persistent, and you guard it against the cold's encroachment. Night stretches, the cold a relentless companion, and you reach the supply cache, a buried crate marked by a rag flag. You dig with bare hands, the soil frozen solid, yielding only after your nails bleed. Inside, a few tins of meat, ammunition wrapped in oilcloth, meager treasures that feel like wealth. You load the sled, sharing a tin with Ivan, the meat tough but nourishing, a brief reprieve from the void. Zhukov's gift, he says, chewing slowly, his eyes distant. You don't reply, but the rumour lingers, a whisper of change in the unyielding freeze. The return crawl begins, the sled heavier now, the ice groaning louder, as if protesting the burden. You make it back, collapsing in the trench, the supplies distributed under the sergeant's watchful eye. The cold retreats slightly with the food, but hunger's shadow remains, a reminder of fragility. Even stows his share, his movements precise, as if order can defy the chaos. The wind picks up, carrying snowflakes that sting like accusations, and you huddle, rifle close, the Volga's ice glittering beyond like a frozen promise or threat. You close your eyes, not to dream, but to endure, the city's frozen heart beating in sync with your weary pulse. The dawn breaks over Stalingrad like a shattered promise, its light filtering through a veil of smoke that clings to the horizon. The air is crisp with frost, carrying the faint, acrid whisper of gunpowder from battles that never truly end. Your body aches, a dull symphony of bruises and fatigue, as you rub sleep from your eyes, the cold turning your fingers into hesitant strangers. The Volga lies behind you, its ice a silent witness to the nights of crawling desperation. But today feels different, a subtle shift in the wind perhaps, or the distant rumble that isn't quite artillery. You grip your Mosin Nagant, its barrel etched with frost, and peer over the edge, the city's ruins stretching out like a canvas painted in shades of grey and despair. Then it begins. The ground trembles, a low vibration that builds into a roar, as if the earth itself is awakening. Katyusha rockets streak across the sky, their trails like fiery serpents uncoiling from hidden lairs, exploding in a cascade of thunder that shakes the snow from the rubble. The sound is overwhelming, a relentless barrage that drowns out thought. Each blast a hammer strike against the German lines. You watch, transfixed, as plumes of dirt and flame erupt in the distance, the horizon blooming with destruction. The air fills with the sharp tang of explosives, mingling with the earthy scent of upturned soil, and you feel the adrenaline surge, a hot current cutting through the cold's grip. Operation Uranus has unleashed its fury, the encirclement closing like a noose drawn tight by invisible hands. You rise, rifle in hand, the foxhole's walls crumbling slightly under your boots. The sergeant's voice cuts through the din, urgent but laced with a rare edge of triumph. Forward! The tide turns. Your squad moves, a ragged line weaving through the debris, the ground still vibrating from the Katyusha's song. Ivan, the Leningrad mechanic, falls in beside you, his PPSH-41 at the ready, his face set in a mask of quiet intensity. Zhukov's symphony, he says, his words barely audible over the roar, a faint curve to his lips, as if the war's reversal is a punchline long awaited. You don't reply, focused on the advance, each step carrying you from defender to pursuer, the roles flipping like a coin tossed by fate. The German positions, once impregnable, now crumble under the onslaught, their bunkers erupting in flames that lick the sky like hungry tongues. You charge through a breach, the air thick with the metallic bite of shrapnel and the acrid reek of burning fuel. Bullets whine past, but they feel scattered, desperate, as if the enemy is unraveling thread by thread. You fire your rifle, the recoil a jolt that grounds you, sending a figure tumbling into the snow. The snow itself is churned into mud, stained with the chaos of retreat, and you press on, the cold forgotten in the heat of momentum. Sasha's absence lingers, a shadow in your periphery, but the barrage drowns it out, turning grief into fuel for the push. Ivan points to a cluster of Germans fleeing a collapsed trench, their helmets bobbing like corks in a storm. They run now, he observes, his tone dry, as if commenting on a parade gone wrong. You nod, squeezing off another shot. The rifle's report lost in the Katyusha's endless chorus. The encirclement is no longer a rumor, It's a living force. Soviet forces sweeping from north and south, trapping the invaders in a pocket of their own making. You feel the shift in your bones, a reversal that tastes of vindication, yet tempered by the knowledge that victory here is as brutal as defeat. The ground is littered with their gear, abandoned rifles, scattered helmets, a testament to panic, and you scavenge a clip, slipping it into your pouch with numb fingers. The advance slows as you reach a ruined square, its fountain dry and cracked, surrounded by buildings gutted like hollowed fruits. Smoke billows from a struck vehicle, its flames casting flickering shadows that dance across the snow. You take cover behind a toppled statue, its marble form chipped and forlorn, and catch your breath, the air sharp with cordite and frost. A German soldier stumbles into view, hands raised, his uniform ragged, eyes wide with the shock of reversal. You train your rifle on him, finger hovering, but the sergeant waves him down, binding his wrists with wire scavenged from the rubble. "Prisoner," he says, his voice flat, as if the word is a verdict rather than mercy. You watch the man, his breath steaming in the cold, his face gaunt under a layer of grime. He mutters something in his language, a plea or curse, but it falls on deaf ears. The encirclement tightens, reports filtering in of Soviet tanks linking up, sealing the pocket like a wound cauterized by fire. You feel a quiet surge, not joy, but a grim satisfaction, as if the motherland's wounds are finally scarring over. Ivan kneels nearby, examining a captured pistol, its mechanism jammed but salvageable. "Their toys break too," he says, his words carrying a subtle bite, as if the war's machinery is as fallible as the men who wield it. You smirk faintly, the expression lost in the gloom, a momentary lift in the weight of endurance. Historians still debate the exact moment when the German Sixth Army realized the trap had sprung. Perhaps when the Katyushas sang, or when their flanks crumbled like dry bread. From this ruined square, with the smoke curling like accusing fingers and the cold wrapping around you like a shroud, it feels like both. A turning point where desperation swaps sides. You're not celebrating, you're surviving. Each breath a quiet affirmation of resilience. The thought drifts to simpler times. A harvest field under sun, a family table laden with plenty, memories that now seem like echoes from another life, yet they anchor you, a silent vow to see them real again. The sergeant orders a push toward a nearby depot, its roof caved in but walls still standing, a bastion in the making. You move, rifle steady, the snow crunching underfoot like brittle bones. A stray shell whistles overhead, exploding harmlessly in the distance, its flash illuminating the faces of your squad, etched with weariness but hardened by the shift. Ivan pockets the pistol, his movements precise, a mechanic's grace in a world of breakage. Zhukov plays chess while they play checkers, he murmurs, his tone laced with a dry amusement that masks the exhaustion in his eyes. You don't laugh, but the observation lingers, a spark in the encroaching dark. The depot yields little, empty crates, a few tins of preserved meat that taste of rust and relief. But it's a foothold, a momentary claim on the encirclement's momentum. You settle against a wall, the stone cold but solid, and watch the horizon where Soviet flares rise like hopeful stars. The cold deepens, turning your exhalations to fleeting clouds, but the hunger feels distant now, subdued by the tide's turn. You think of the Germans trapped in their web, their arrogance unraveling thread by thread, and feel a quiet kinship with the river's ice. Unyielding, patient, inevitable. The night stretches, the barrage fading to echoes, and you close your eyes, not to dream, but to gather strength for the dawn's unforgiving light. The encirclement coils around Stalingrad like a serpent awakening from slumber. It scales the rumble of Soviet tanks grinding through the snow-draped ruins. The air vibrates with the echo of katyushas fading into memory, replaced by the closer clamour of boots and gunfire, each shot a punctuation in the war's shifting narrative. Your breath steams in the biting chill, mingling with the sharp scent of churned earth and diesel as you advance through a street choked with debris, its buildings leaning like weary sentinels guarding forgotten secrets. The cold is a persistent shadow, nipping at your heels, but the momentum of Uranus carries you forward, transforming exhaustion into a quiet burning drive. Your Mosin Nagant, reloaded from scavenged clips, feels lighter now, a tool of reclamation rather than mere survival. You weave through a plaza scarred by craters, the ground uneven underfoot, each step sinking slightly into the frost-softened mud. The sergeant leads, his silhouette sharp against the pallid sky, gesturing toward a row of gutted apartments, their windows empty eyes staring blankly at the advance. Even the Leningrad mechanic moves beside you, his PPSH-41 at the ready, his gaze sweeping the facades with a mechanic's eye for flaws. They're crumbling, he observes, his voice low, as if noting a rusted gear in a vast machine. You nod, catching the faint irony in his tone, a subtle nod to the reversal where the invaders now fracture under pressure. The Germans retreat in disarray, their positions yielding like brittle ice under a boot, and you press on, rifle raised, the thrill of pursuit tempered by the war's unyielding cost. A burst of resistance erupts from a corner building, bullets snapping past like angry hornets, and you dive behind a toppled cart, its wooden frame splintered but solid. The shots ricochet off stone, sending chips flying that sting your cheek, drawing a thin line of blood. You return fire, the rifles kick a jolt that steadies your nerves, and watch a figure slump in the window, a shadow folding into obscurity. The air fills with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid bite of cordite, a cocktail that sharpens your senses amid the haze. Ivan crawls forward, his weapon chattering in short bursts, clearing the doorway, his precision a quiet rebellion against the disorder. Like fixing a broken engine, he mutters, wiping sweat from his brow, the words carrying a dry edge that masks the weariness in his eyes. You storm the building, boots echoing on cracked tiles, the interior a warren of overturned furniture and shattered glass that crunches underfoot like fragile memories. The rooms are dim, lit by slivers of light piercing through boarded windows, casting long shadows that dance with each movement. A German soldier emerges from a side room, hands raised, his uniform tattered, face gaunt under a layer of grime and frost. His eyes, wide with resignation, meet yours, and you motion him down, binding his wrists with wire scavenged from the walls. He doesn't resist, his shoulders slumping like a puppet with cut strings, and you feel a fleeting pang, not pity, but a recognition of shared fragility in this unforgiving arena. The prisoner mutters in broken Russian, offering a gold watch from his pocket, its face scratched, but gleaming faintly in the gloom. "Bread," he pleads, his voice hoarse, as if the word is a currency more valuable than metal. You take the watch, not for greed, but for the irony it holds, a symbol of time's cruel march, traded for sustenance in a place where days blend into endless struggle. Ivan watches, his expression unreadable, and pockets a few bullets from the man's belt. "They're treasures for our crumbs," he says, his tone laced with a subtle bite, as if the exchange is the war's mockery of value. You hand the prisoner a morsel from your ration, hard and meager, and watch him devour it, the act a quiet testament to the reversal where the mighty now beg. More prisoners trickle in, herded by your squad, their forms skeletal under uniforms that hang like shrouds, eyes hollow with the shock of defeat. They shuffle into a corner, guarded loosely, their whispers a murmur of disbelief. You search them methodically, finding maps stained with mud, letters from home folded carefully, a reminder that they too carry fragments of lives left behind. The building's walls, pocked with fresh holes, seem to absorb their defeat, the structure standing as a silent judge. The cold seeps through the cracks, turning their breaths to fleeting clouds, and you feel the encirclement's grip tighten, a noose drawn by Soviet resolve. Historians still debate the precise instant when the German Sixth Army grasped their entrapment. Perhaps the failure of Goering's air bridge, or the slaughter of their last horses for meat. From this captured room, with a gold watch heavy in your pocket, and prisoners huddled like forgotten statues, it feels like both. A moment where arrogance unravels into desperation. You're not reveling in victory. You're witnessing the war's cruel symmetry, where hunters become the hunted. The thought drifts to peacetime markets, where watches marked hours of joy, not survival, and you hold it close, a quiet affirmation of endurance. The sergeant organizes a perimeter, his commands crisp despite the fatigue etching his voice, and you take a post by a window, rifle resting on the sill. The view overlooks a street littered with abandoned gear, helmets, packs, a boot half buried in snow. A landscape of retreat. Ivan joins you, cleaning his weapon with a rag, his movements deliberate. They thought this city was theirs, he says, his words soft but edged, as if the irony is a balm for the scars. You nod, the cold wind slipping through the frame, carrying the faint cries of more surrendering figures. Prisoners stream in, their numbers swelling, each one a thread in the tapestry of reversal, their gaunt faces mirroring the hunger you've known, but now turned against them. You question one, a young officer with trembling hands, his insignia tarnished. He speaks of failed supplies, of promises broken by the high command, his voice a whisper of betrayal. You listen, not for intelligence, but for the human frailty it reveals. A crack in the facade of invincibility. He offers his ring, another trinket for food, and you wave it away. The gesture a silent commentary on the war's absurd economy. The encirclement is complete, reports confirm. Soviet forces linking arms around the pocket, sealing fates with steel and snow. The cold deepens, turning the room into a chilled vault. But the momentum warms your resolve, a quiet fire against the encroaching night. As dusk falls, the prisoners are grouped, their eyes downcast, the weight of defeat bowing their shoulders. You stand guard, rifle loose, the scene a tableau of war's capricious turn. Ivan lights a cigarette, the glow brief and defiant. Their empire for a meal, he murmurs, exhaling smoke that curls like a question mark. You don't respond, but the observation lingers, a wry note in the symphony of survival. The city outside hums with the sounds of consolidation, tanks rumbling, voices calling, and you feel the encirclement's embrace, a destiny fulfilled in frost and fire. You think of homes untouched by siege, of tables set with plenty, and hold the vision close, a beacon in the gathering dark. The night stretches, the cold a companion, but the tide has turned, carrying you toward an uncertain dawn. The encirclement squeezes Stalingrad like a fist closing around a fading ember, the once mighty German advance reduced to a stutter of retreats and whispers. The snow falls in lazy veils, blanketing the ruins in a deceptive peace, its flakes melting on your upturned face like fleeting regrets. The air hangs heavy with the musty scent of damp earth and unwashed bodies, a quiet testament to the siege's toll. Your coat, patched with scavenged cloth, offers little against the steppes' persistent chill, a dry frost that seeps into your joints, turning movement into a laboured ritual. The Kessel, the cauldron, simmers with desperation, the Germans trapped within its walls, their strength ebbing like a river running dry. You stand guard on a makeshift barricade, rifle slung low, watching the horizon, where their lines once bristled with menace now sag under the weight of inevitability. The days blend into a slow unravelling, the gunfire sporadic, more a gasp than a roar, as if the war itself is weary of the slaughter. You patrol the perimeter, boots sinking into snow churned to mud, the ground a patchwork of craters and discarded gear. The cold is a constant companion, wrapping around you like a shroud woven from forgotten promises. But it's the hunger in the enemy's eyes that lingers most. Prisoners trickle in, not in droves, but in weary clusters, their uniforms hanging loose on frames whittled by starvation, faces etched with the hollow stare of defeat. You bind their hands with rope frayed from use, their wrists thin as twigs, and lead them to a holding area, a gutted warehouse where the wind whistles through gaps like a mocking lament. One group arrives at dusk, a ragged line of men shuffling through the snow, their breaths forming clouds that dissipate like dreams unfulfilled. The sergeant directs you to escort them, his voice a low rumble, and you fall in step, rifle at the ready, but not raised. Ivan joins you, his PPSH-41, a silent sentinel, his gaze sweeping the prisoners with a mechanic's eye for broken parts. Among them is a boy, barely older than a recruit, his helmet ill-fitting, eyes wide with a fear that mirrors the raw edge of youth thrust into the abyss. He stumbles, knees buckling in the snow, and collapses, his body folding like a letter sealed with despair. The group halts, but no one moves to help. Their exhaustion is a barrier too high to cross. You pause. The boys form a stark silhouette against the white expanse, his gasps faint in the crisp air. The cold bites deeper, turning the scene into a frozen tableau, and you feel a void open within. An emptiness neither hatred nor pity can fill, just a profound hollowness that echoes the war's senseless grind. Ivan steps forward, his boot crunching snow, and tugs at your sleeve. "Leave him," he says, his tone flat but laced with a subtle resignation, as if mercy is a luxury the Kessel has long devoured. You nod, turning away, the boy's plea lost to the wind, a whisper in the vast silence of defeat. The group moves on, the prisoners' steps laboured, their shadows lengthening like accusations cast by the dying light. The warehouse looms, its roof sagging under snow's weight, walls pocked with holes that let in drafts like uninvited ghosts. You heard the prisoners inside, the air thick with the stale odour of mildew and defeat, a scent that clings to their clothes and seeps into your own. They slump against the walls, eyes glazed, murmuring in low tones that carry no fight, only the weary cadence of surrender. One, an officer with insignia tarnished by mud, stares at the floor, his hands trembling as he clutches an empty canteen. You watch him, not with triumph, but a quiet recognition that the war strips all to their barest selves, invaders and defenders alike reduced to vessels of endurance. Ivan leans against a beam, cleaning his nails with a shard of metal, his movements deliberate. "They came for glory, left with ghosts," he murmurs, his words hanging in the chill like smoke from a dying fire. You don't respond, but the observation settles, a wry note in the symphony of collapse, highlighting the absurdity of ambitions crumbled to dust. The sergeant counts heads, his ledger a tattered notebook, each name a mark in the ledger of history's balance. The prisoners receive a thin soup, ladled from a pot over a meager flame, its steam rising like fleeting hopes. You take your ration, the broth watery but warm, a brief rebellion against the gnawing void within. The night deepens, the cold sharpening into a blade that cuts through layers, turning breath to crystals that shatter on the wind. You stand watch outside, the snow falling softly, muffling the city's scars. The Kessel's hunger is palpable now. Reports of Germans slaughtering horses for meat filtering through like grim tales. You think of feasts in distant villages, tables laden with plenty, laughter echoing under roofs untouched by bombs. A world where sustenance was a given, not a gamble. The memory is a quiet anchor, reminding you of the resilience that has carried you this far, a testament to the human spirit's stubborn flame. Historians still debate whether Paulus's surrender was the pivotal turn in the war, or merely the closing of Stalingrad's infernal chapter. From this snow-bound vigil, with prisoners huddled in defeat and the cold whispering of costs unpaid, it feels like both, a moment where victory tastes of ash, laced with the bitterness of lives expended. You're not celebrating. You're witnessing the war's cruel poetry, where triumph and tragedy entwine like vines on a forgotten grave. Ivan joins you, offering a cigarette rolled from scavenged paper, its smoke curling upward like a question unanswered. Their empire for a crust, he says, the words soft but edged, as if the reversal is the war's satire. The prisoners inside stir, a low murmur rising, not of rebellion, but resignation. You glance through the doorway, seeing the boy from earlier, propped against a wall, his eyes closed in fitful rest. The void returns, a hollow space where emotion once resided, now filled with the war's unyielding echo. The sergeant relieves you, his nod a silent acknowledgement of the shared burden, and you retreat to a corner, wrapping your coat tighter. The cold presses in, but the encirclement's grip feels complete, a destiny fulfilled in frost and finality. You close your eyes, not to escape, but to endure. The night silence a canvas for reflections on a world remade by fire and ice. The silence descends on Stalingrad like a heavy curtain drawn across a stage where the final act has played out in blood and echoes. The air hangs still, devoid of the relentless thunder that once defined every breath, every heartbeat in this forsaken city. Snowflakes drift lazily, settling on the rubble like a gentle shroud over wounds that still weep. You stand in the red October square, its pavement cracked and scarred, the flag of the motherland fluttering atop a shattered department store, its crimson a stark brushstroke against the grey expanse. The wind whispers through the gaps in the buildings, carrying the faint, earthy scent of thawed mud and lingering ash. A reminder that peace here is not an arrival, but an absence, a void where chaos once roared. Your boots sink slightly into the slush, the cold a subdued murmur now, no longer the savage bite that clawed at your flesh during those endless nights. The square stretches before you, empty of life but filled with ghosts. Overturned carts frozen in place, walls pocked with craters that resemble the eyes of the weary. Victory tastes like ashes on your tongue, dry and unfulfilling. A hollow triumph forged from the forge of too many losses. You've held the city, kept it from the invader's grasp, but the price is etched in the landscape, in the hollows of your cheeks, in the quiet spaces where comrades once stood. The flag waves, defiant yet forlorn, as if it too questions the cost of its perch. You wander to a low wall, its stone rough under your palm, and sit, the chill seeping through your coat like a persistent memory. Your fingers, stiff from the frost's lingering touch, fumble for the last cigarette, its paper crumpled but intact, a small relic of endurance. You light it with a match that flares briefly, a tiny sun in the twilight, and inhale deeply, the smoke curling upward like unanswered prayers. The flavor is bitter, laced with the dust of battles past, but it grounds you, a momentary anchor in the sea of stillness. Exhaustion washes over you, not the sharp stab of combat, but a deep, resonant weariness, as if you're a mountain weathered by storms. Its peaks eroded, but its base unyielding. The square is a tapestry of remnants, scattered helmets half buried in snow, a broken rifle leaning against a lamppost like a forgotten sentinel, fragments of lives interrupted. You gaze at them, not with anger, but a profound melancholy, a recognition that war devours without discrimination, leaving only echoes. Sasha comes to mind, not as the boy felled by a sniper's whim, but as the spark he carried, the fierce light that illuminated those dark hours before it flickered out. You don't mourn him openly. Grief here is private, a shadow you carry like the weight of your rifle, now slung uselessly at your side. Comrades lost in the grain elevator's haze, in the Volga's icy embrace. They linger in the silence, their absence a quiet accusation against the victory you've claimed. A figure in the distance catches your eye, a German soldier, or what remains of one, staggering through the snow, his uniform a tattered flag of surrender. He collapses, knees buckling, face down in the white expanse, his body a dark stain on the purity of the drift. You watch, unmoved yet connected by the thread of shared humanity, the war's cruel symmetry where victors and vanquished share the same exhaustion. No hatred surges, no triumph swells, only an emptiness, vast as the steppe, where emotions once raged now lie dormant. Even would say something wry, perhaps about the snow claiming what bullets couldn't, but he's elsewhere, mending what's left of the squad's gear, his silence a companion to your own. The flag snaps in the breeze, its red vivid against the muted world, a symbol hoisted not in joy, but in quiet assertion. You've won, held the city against the tide, but the bitterness lingers like smoke in your lungs, a residue of the lives expended like currency in a game of gods. The square, once a hub of activity, now stands as a monument to resilience, its emptiness a canvas for reflections on what endures when all else crumbles. You think of worlds untouched by siege, where squares host markets and laughter, not the ghosts of battles. The contrast is stark, a quiet gratitude for the fragile peace of the present, a nod to the tenacity that carried you through the abyss. Your cigarette burns low, its ember a fading star in the gathering dusk, and you crush it under your boot, the spark extinguished with a faint hiss. The silence is profound, not peaceful but penetrating, a vacuum where the war's clamour once filled every crevice. It presses on you, heavy yet liberating, allowing thoughts to surface like bubbles from deep water. The city, scarred and silent, mirrors your state, battered but unbroken, its pulse slowed to a whisper. You lean back against the wall, the stone cool against your back, and let the exhaustion settle, a blanket woven from the threads of survival. Memories flicker, not of glory or speeches, but of small acts, the warmth of a shared fire, the nod of a comrade, the stubborn refusal to yield. They're the true victors, these quiet defiances, outlasting the roar of cannons and the bluster of commands. The German in the snow, now still, becomes a symbol, not of enmity, but of the war's impartial reaping, harvesting all in its path. You feel no schadenfreude, only a somber kinship, a recognition that survival is a lottery drawn by chance and will. The square fades into twilight, the flag a dark silhouette, and you rise slowly, joints protesting, to rejoin the remnants of your unit. The night envelops the city, stars piercing the sky like distant witnesses to the saga below. You walk through the square, the snow crunching softly, each step a farewell to the storm that raged. The silence is chafing at first, an unfamiliar guest after months of tumult, but it grows on you, a space for contemplation. Victory is bitter, laced with the salt of tears unshed, but it's yours, forged in the crucible of endurance. You think of futures rebuilt from ruins, cities rising like phoenixes from ash, lives mended thread by thread. The contrast with this desolation evokes a quiet appreciation for the resilience that history demands, a lesson in the tenacity of the human spirit. You reach a low bench, its wood warped but sturdy, and sit again, the cold a familiar companion now. The cigarette's aftertaste lingers, a faint bitterness that mirrors the triumph's edge. The war's end in Stalingrad is not a fanfare but a sigh, a release from the grip of constant dread. You reflect on the boy in the snow, on comrades faded into memory, on the flag that waves not in jubilation, but in quiet assertion. The silence amplifies these thoughts, turning them into a meditative hum, a reminder that peace is often the absence of noise, not the presence of joy. As the stars brighten, you lean back, the wall a cold pillar supporting your weight. The city sleeps, or what's left of it, its scars hidden in the dark. You feel the exhaustion crest, a wave that carries you toward rest, the first true respite in months. No rifle in your arms, no watch for dawn patrols, just the silence, enveloping you like a long-forgotten blanket. You close your eyes, the world fading to a whisper, and let the night claim you, a soldier at last unburdened, if only for this moment. As the echoes of Stalingrad fade into the night, you've crossed the frozen Volga's whisper, endured the rubble's crushing embrace, and witnessed victory's bittersweet dawn. Like a storm that reshapes the earth, leaving silence in its wake. In this WW2 history sleep story, we've walked as a Soviet soldier through hell's labyrinth, feeling the raw grit of survival in the Battle of Stalingrad, where every breath was a defiant poem against oblivion. Now, let your body soften, limbs heavy as fallen snow, mind drifting like mist over the steppe. Breathe deeply, release the day's burdens, and surrender to sleep's gentle tide. If wakefulness lingers, share your thoughts below. What stirred in your heart tonight? Tomorrow's tale awaits, another whisper from history's shadows. Rest well, dreamer.